What's up, guys? It's the phenomenal AJ Styles, and you're listening to another wrestling podcast.
It's time for another wrestling podcast.
The measuring stick just changed around here, buddy. You're looking at
the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be.
They think they got the answers. I change the question.
The cream of the crop. Nobody does it better. These are the best in the world, brother. These are the best at what they do.
When we talk about the legends of the sport, there's only two in my book.
Another wrestling podcast.
Another wrestling podcast. Now can you dig that, sucker?
Welcome everybody to another wrestling podcast. I'm Jonathan Benjamin.
And I'm Steve Credo.
This is episode number 103. The hits just keep on coming. And Steve, I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to tell all of our listeners out there today, best show ever. Best show ever.
I'm going to hold you to that, Jonathan, because not only will it be the best show ever, but we're also going to have one of the greatest guests ever. Dan the Beast Severn is going to be joining us today. The man's done it all, from MMA to pro wrestling. So he'll be here in a little bit. He'll be in the AWP studios. We'll be talking to him, and we'll see what he has to say and catch up a little bit with Dan Severn. What do you think about that one, huh?
Yeah, I mean, that's I can't wait to talk to Dan. It's going to be really cool. Steve, I just want to get your thoughts. I know today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the scandals that have rocked professional wrestling, but since we have Dan the Beast Severn on, and we don't really get a chance to talk about UFC very often, what are some of your thoughts about UFC in the sense that we've got some crossover talent? We've got, we've had Ken Shamrock, we've had Dan Severn, we've got Brock Lesnar who actually crossed over to UFC, and CM Punk who crossed over or is crossing over into UFC, and Undertaker uses some submission moves and all that stuff. So what are your thoughts on that kind of crossover? Are you a fan of UFC? Are you a fan of how wrestling and UFC have kind of went hand in hand over the years?
Jonathan, from what I understand, I believe UFC is predetermined, so I don't know what everybody else knows out there about Ultimate Fighting Championship, but no, yeah, it's, I honestly, I don't watch it as much. You know why? Because I do not want to spend $50 on a match or a show that lasts like 4 seconds if the guy gets knocked out. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'd rather spend that kind of money on a WrestleMania. But, I think the crossover is great because it's almost guys coming from the WWE going to UFC to prove themselves that they're more than just a wrestler is awesome. Especially the main attraction with Brock Lesnar, to where he went over there, dominated it, became the world heavyweight champion over there. The UFC heavyweight champion, whatever you want to call it, but he was the heavyweight champion, and proved himself. He was more than just a wrestler, and then we're going to kind of see what happens with CM Punk doing that too, to where he's kind of a little bit older in his age, but I mean, he wants to prove himself, and I guess we're going to find out this year what happens. But even guys like Ken Shamrock coming from MMA, UFC over to the WWE to prove that they can do more than just fighting, and they can hang in the ring with a lot of wrestlers and be a pro wrestler. So it's worked out a lot in both ways. Even our guest on the show today, Dan Severn, he's done it all. He's even laced up his boots for pro wrestling. So in many cases it works. Some cases it may not work, but I mean, some of what we've seen through the years, I think it's been a great mix to where maybe if a guy just doesn't want to really fight for a while, because there's only so much you can do in UFC before losing your brain cells even more, just getting hit in the head nonstop every week or every month or whatever their fights are. But it's a great big bag of tricks, Jonathan, to where it works with some, it may not work with all, but I've loved what we've seen so far of who's coming, who's going on both sides. So
I think it's cool. I think UFC is starting to use some of these pro wrestling tricks for promoting. You have these big main event fights. You've got Conor McGregor, who's kind of a trash talker. It's awesome. You got Ronda Rousey, who's also been involved with wrestling. So I think that there is it's a natural kind of crossover for anybody from UFC come to WWE or vice versa. And you know what? Like with WWE's competition slowly but surely going away, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be pulling from the UFC here in a couple of years whenever, let's say TNA goes out of business or whatever. So I love the idea behind it. I do like UFC. It's something I don't get to watch as much as I would like to, but I'm glad to have Dan Severn on. We can get into some of that.
And please, take your time, subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, Player FM, or TuneIn. You can find Another Wrestling Podcast on any of these platforms.
Guys, we are all over social media. We also have our very own Pro Wrestling Tees site. So if you'd like to pick up a shirt and support the podcast, head on over to prowrestlingtees.com/Another Wrestling Podcast.
And be sure to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Another Wrestling Podcast. And if you like us, you'll be sure to follow us as well on Twitter at @AWrestlingPod. That's A Wrestling Pod.
And if you are not sick of us yet, you might be after this. Follow us on YouTube, youtube.com/Another Wrestling Pod. We have YouTube exclusives on there. We have independent spotlights. We have never before seen interviews. And if you want to catch one of our old shows, you can head on over to YouTube and look up, say, episode 100, where we had the Demon Finn Balor on. All right. Well, we also have an Instagram, ladies and gentlemen. Follow us at Another Wrestling Podcast on Instagram. You never know what you're going to see on our Instagram.
All right, here once again we have Jason Regeneration with Jason Sensation. Last week we heard part of his story. He's going to finish up this week with part 2.
Sometimes you'll still find me on Twitter. I like to mess with Michael Cole a lot and send him pretty rude comments about how he looks that night on Raw. Or, I find it funny when I'm telling Vince to whisper into Michael Cole's headset, that he made a mistake here or there. Maybe Vince will get a chuckle out of this. Whoever's reading is going to get a chuckle out of this. And really the truth about it is it's coming from that resentful, hurt place that I feel Michael Cole was so rude to me when I worked for WWE, and I feel like he had a chance to help me at a certain point, and he didn't want to help me. And Kevin Dunn wanted to hook me up with Michael Cole and have me and work with Michael Cole. And Michael Cole, after one day of driving with me, told Kevin Dunn that it wasn't going to work, and he didn't want to work with me. And I don't know, there was just a condescending attitude I felt Michael Cole had towards me. And the last time I saw him, it was a year since they had done anything with me, and they flew me down to do these SmackDown commercials. And Michael Cole walked up to this agent beside me that was directing these commercials and said, "What the hell is he doing here? 3 inches away from me." And he didn't say hello to me or shake my hand. I had my hand out and said, "Hey, Michael, how are you?" And he kayfabed the handshake and said, "Well, you know that they're really hurting for talent if they're going to bring this guy down." And he turned around and walked away. And whether he was ribbing or not, I had already begun to suffer depression then at that time. And it broke my heart the way he could just walk away and treat me like that. And that scarred me. That really scarred me. And that stayed with me. And that was a brick in this bag I've been holding on to for so long. I don't want to hold on to that brick anymore. I don't want to go on Twitter and try to make fun of him and make, people laugh at, jokes that I can tweet about to try to annoy Michael Cole. I've even been ringside at shows where I've been screaming at Michael Cole and, just berating him. "You stole my job," and, things that had everybody around me laughing at the time. But, it doesn't bring me any peace. And it keeps that brick heavy in my bag. And, I've left Michael Cole messages that, but years ago I left him messages when I was first suffering that he turned around and, made jokes about on Raw the next night. And I don't want to be doing that and leaving more negative out there and, keep throwing fire on a bridge that burned down a long time ago. I want to say sorry to Michael Cole. I want to say that I'm sorry to Michael Cole for all the tweets I've sent him. And I want to say sorry for the rotten things I've said to him, whether I've been in the audience or whether I've been on air or whether I've left it on an answering machine or whether I've tweeted it. I want to say sorry to Michael Cole, and I wish I could take those things back. And I think he's a very talented announcer and broadcaster, and I enjoy watching him, and I enjoy him being the voice of WWE. And I was really hurt by the things he said to me years ago and by the way he treated me when I worked for the company, and by him not reaching out and wanting to help me, get to his level. And I was so young and so green, and I don't want to be hurt about it anymore. I want to lift the brick off and take it out of the bag and say, I forgive you, Michael Cole, for that, and I'm really sorry for everything I've said to you since and everything I've put online. Even if you don't know about it, even if you have no idea about this, I want to say it anyway, that I'm sorry and I forgive you and I want to leave it in the past. And Michael Cole is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there are a whole lot of bricks in this bag I want to take off and let out. So I've got a lot of these bricks to let out of the bag. As much as I appreciate the opportunity from another wrestling podcast to allow me to, touch base with some of the comedy and some of the impressions that got me to the dance and that I'd hoped would keep me in WWE my entire life. Getting to share some of that was, I feel, that has been lost over the years. At the same time, I want to take this big bag of bricks off my shoulders. I want to let it off. And maybe I'll be sharing some more of these sentiments throughout this Jason Regeneration show on another wrestling podcast, and trying to make amends with people that I've, held such grudges with over the years. That's what I'm going to, try to do. And so you won't just find always funny impressions and things of that nature. You're going to hear more of the serious side of me, and you're going to, as much as I can, I'm going to try to let this off my chest as much as I can. Like I honestly, when I was starting the first part of this, I was trying to take a hiatus, and these guys are just to stay on the show and just open up about what's going on, so I don't have to take a hiatus. But that's what happens with mental illness. Some days you wake up and you just can't face the world, and some days you don't want to talk to anybody, and you're afraid to speak, and you're afraid to, the fearful thoughts and the delusional thoughts and the paranoid thoughts that can come along with some mental illnesses are just way further on a human soul. And maybe this can be therapeutic for me to not always try to be so funny, and maybe in this way I can continue to keep this podcast up while suffering from mental illnesses. So that's what I'm going to try to do. And I don't know. If there's one more thing before I go that I'd like to just say, before maybe next week we can get to some funnier stuff, but I'd like to send out an apology to Edge and Christian. I was really, really hurt when I first watched their show on the WWE Network. I was really hurt to see them make fun of Davey Boy Smith and Mike Shaw, Bastion Booger. I thought with a whole library of content, and an entire library of content, and an entire library of past WWE moments, and an entire roster to work with, I thought you don't need to make fun of wrestlers that have passed on, because there could be family members watching, and you're talking about Bastion Brugger's sweaty balls. What happens if his wife's watching, or his kids are watching, or anyone from his family's watching? Just think about how they might feel when they see something like that. I have close friends that are in Davey Boy Smith's family, and to be mocking him, and I just thought it was very disrespectful and thoughtless, and maybe something they didn't take into consideration. So I tweeted them about it, and I said, guys, I love your show, and I think it's funny, and I think you're better than that. And I haven't really ever been friends with Edge and Christian. They were in the same wrestling school I was in, but for some reason they clicked, and I wasn't part of that clique. I was, we called it the B team I was part of, and these guys would come to pick up Shin Kazarni after wrestling workouts, and my now friend Flesh, they would bring them out, and they were in the clique, or Fuego was in the clique, but I wasn't in the clique, and I was never invited to dinner out with these guys. Kazarni used to come on the house shows and spit water into my face and do all these things that I didn't understand, and I just figured, it was like a bullying type thing. Like, these guys are too cool and I can't be in the cool group. Even though Edge and Christian and I would be doing WWE things together, we'd be in the same limo and doing signings and different events together. I never became their friends, and I wanted to be their friends, and I felt like, they were too cool for me to be their friends, but that was okay. I never held that against them. It's just so be it. That's the way life goes sometimes, and that's the way it is in the dressing room. Some people don't like other people, so I was green too, and I was a mark to some degree, and so maybe that's how they viewed me once they were on TV, so I never held it against them. Adam Copeland's always been very nice to me. Christian and Jay Riso, he's been nice to me as well. Like, there's never been a problem. We've always shook hands, and there was never really issues between us, but we were never friends. And maybe acquaintances, but never friends. And I still thought that me tweeting them that, if they saw the tweet with so many tweets going out all the time and whatever, if they had at least seen the tweet, that it might at least get to them, that, they might think twice. And to try to make a long story short, I was watching, after seeing that, I thought I'm not even going to watch that program anymore, just in case, because I didn't want to get caught up in my mental illness and say something awful that I might regret. And that's basically what happened. And it was by accident that I was watching a Raw show, and a commercial for the Edge and Christian show came on, and I saw a quick scene of two wrestlers in a sumo match, and Edge mocked those wrestlers, and I immediately jumped to conclusions and thought it was Yokozuna versus John Penta's WrestleMania match, and I was their sumo match that they had together, and I was completely, I went off the deep end, and I blew a gasket. I was so pissed, and I said, okay, I tried to nicely say something the first time, and now I'm going to say something. And I tweeted them something really like, hey, guys, come on. And I was pretty rude in the tweet. And then I went on Facebook, and I put up a big, giant note that so many people gave thumbs up to, that was like, hey, and it was basically pointing the finger at Christian and Edge and WWE and WWE's network for allowing this to happen. Like, how many more guys are you going to make fun of that have passed away? And how many more guys that have passed away's families are watching that you're going to be making fun of when you have all this other content you could be using? And I went off the deep end, and, at my buddy's house, Bert the Hurt, when I was at his house watching WrestleMania, the Edge and Christian show came on after, and he's good friends with them, or a big fan of them, and he was good friends with them. So he's watching the show, and I see that this same segment come on that I'd seen the commercial I flipped out about, and it was actually not the match I was thinking it was, and it was the Big Show sumo match against Akabono, or whoever his opponent was, that he had a sumo match. And cold sweat went down my neck realizing I blew a stack for the wrong reason. And maybe they weren't doing it anymore, and maybe that tweet had reached them, and maybe they'd stopped doing it. And I felt really, really awful for that. just going off the deep end on them. So as much as I might have had, right to say what I was saying, and maybe it is right what I was saying, maybe it got to them and maybe they're not doing that anymore, and I don't watch that show religiously. So I do want to take back the anger and the negativity I put out there against the company and Edge and Christian. And I do want to apologize to both of them, and I really hope that they're no longer doing that for obvious reasons, that they're no longer mocking anyone who's passed away. Okay. Thank you very much for hearing me out. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you to Steve and Jonathan, and all the best to everyone, and God bless. And again, to anyone suffering from mental illness, speak up, reach out. There's help out there, and you're not alone. Okay, thank you so much. This is Jason with a 2-part version of Jason Regeneration. And maybe I'll bring my brother Johnny Bloodclot on next week with me and show you some of his impersonations. So we can bring the comedy back into this and bring back some comic relief onto the show. Thanks so much for the opportunity, guys. And thanks for listening, everybody. Jason Appreciation.
Community calendar.
All right, AWP Universe. This is Jonathan here from Another Wrestling Podcast. I will be at the Icons of Wrestling and Comic Book Collectors Fest. That's coming up April 16th, 2016, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the 2300 Arena, the old ECW Arena in Philadelphia, PA. You can come on out, you can see me, and you can see some of these amazing guests they have lined up. They have Shawn Michaels, they have Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Rob Van Dam's going to be there, Mickey James, Booker T, Tommy Dreamer, Road Warrior Animal, WWE Hall of Famer Stan Hansen, Howard Finkel, Bobby Heenan, Marty Jannetty, Sabu, Rhino. The list goes on and on and on. If you want any more information about this, head on over to thecollectorfest.com. You can get tickets, you can get the schedule, you can get any and all information. And if you see me there, come on up, say hello. Looking forward to meeting all of you at the Icons of Wrestling and Comic Book Collector Fest.
I want to talk a little bit about scandals today. Are you down with that, Jonathan?
Oh, I always love a good scandal, Steve.
So I want to play a little game. We have this site open right now. We're on ringsidenews.com. They're talking about scandals that rocked the professional wrestling world. So, Jonathan, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a brief scandal, and then I want you to give me your 2 cents about it, and then we'll go back and forth like that, and I don't know, just get our thoughts on some of these scandals.
Okay, all right.
So, Jonathan, the first scandal. In 1993, Arn Anderson and Sid Vicious were involved in a nasty hotel room brawl in the UK that resulted in Anderson receiving 20 stab wounds from a pair of scissors. It all started with liquor and trash talk. Arn supposedly said Sid wasn't horseman material, and Sid said that Arn never drew money in his life. Later that night, Sid showed up at Arn's hotel room door, cold cocking him with something. No one is quite sure what, but Arn grabbed a pair of scissors to defend himself. The two men struggled, and Arn ended up with 20 stab wounds and losing dangerous amounts of blood, with Sid getting 3 or 4 of his own. Now, Too Cold Scorpio broke up the fight, and both men were rushed to the hospital. If you ever wondered where Sid's Psycho moniker came from, look no further. At the time, Vicious was the WCW Heavyweight Champion, but that did not stop the company from firing him for instigating this attack. Now, Jonathan, I don't know if this is the first time you heard about this, or you might have heard about it, but what are your initial thoughts on this scandal?
Well, first of all, to steal a line from Joey Gladstone, cut it out.
Oh, he did not.
Oh yeah, I just went there. But no, this is crazy. And back in the day, I think that, wrestling's always been a really competitive sport. They talk about it all the time, that in professional football and professional baseball, the NBA, there's so many more teams out there, there's so many more positions and all that stuff. But in professional wrestling, there really isn't a lot. And when it comes down to that, mixed with alcohol, and since they were in the UK, there's a good chance that they're really jet-lagged. I am a little surprised that Arn didn't really decapitate Sid. I would have assumed that he would have put up more of a fight, and maybe he did. I don't know, but And to say that Arn Anderson never drew money is the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard in my life. But I guess now I'm really not that surprised about Psycho Sid.
All I'm thinking about this briefly is, he was in the WWE in like the 80s or whatever, went to WCW, came back. So I'm thinking this is right. So when he came back to the WWE for Raw, that's when they started using Psycho Sid. And I was just thinking about this, trying to place this in time. And so that's pretty crazy. That's one scandalous thing. And wow, I don't know how he got hired after that, pretty much.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. I don't understand how these companies, I guess, money talks. So they think, well, we can maybe use this person or whatever, so we'll bring him back. But I don't know that I would ever bring in somebody that has potentially stabbed somebody.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's a pretty crazy one, and that's it's not necessarily. I mean, I'd heard rumblings of it before. I didn't think I'd heard that entire story. So that's pretty crazy stuff, Steve.
Yeah. As briefly as we could get into it, but yeah, basically, it's one scandal.
Well, I'm going to pull one up here. Scandal, you say, Steve?
Yes.
We've got plenty more where that one came from. I want to talk to you about a little thing that happened in 1992. In the WWF at the time. And the story says, in 1992, former WWF ring attendant Tom Cole came forward alleging that he had been the victim of sexual misconduct at the hands of ring announcer Mel Phillips and former wrestler Terry Garvin. The scandal would plague the promotion for years. Phillips was exposed as a pedophile who frequently took advantage of underage boys he supervised at live events. Most of these boys came from broken homes and troubled backgrounds. Terry Garvin, who worked in the front office of Titan Towers, was also accused over the years of accosting young men, and the WWF had to pay out settlements in several of these cases. Cole's accusation shook the foundation of the WWF. Terry Garvin and Pat Patterson resigned from the WWF in March of '92 as a result of the allegations of sexual misconduct. Mel Phillips was fired. Patterson was later rehired by the company.
Well. The old sex scandal. It's crazy. I think if I could be wrong about this, but isn't one of these guys that you mentioned, weren't they like blurred out of footage on like the network and stuff? Like they can't show certain shots because he was on there or something like that. This is the guy, right?
Yeah.
So basically I heard the story briefly, but hey man, it's one of those Benoit things, to where you could do a lot of things and still be recognized in the WWE, but one of them, when it's involving child or sex stuff like that, pedophile things, that they're not going to show you anymore. So I've heard about this briefly, but that's pretty crazy. It's one of those things. Hey man, they covered it up pretty good because you only hear it briefly every so often. So it's one of those things that it's been Benoit. So crazy scandals.
Yeah, and these are these are taboo subjects here in the world of wrestling, but it's important to know about them so you kind of don't retrace history and get back into them. Steve, I know that you're just itching to get at another one here. So what do you got?
All right, so I have the death of Brian Pillman. Let me read this to you real quick. When the Loose Cannon died the night before a major pay-per-view in '97, no one could believe it. A lot of people thought that it was a work at first. With all the things that Pillman had pulled in the year or so leading up to his death, no one would have been surprised. But Brian Pillman managed to beat the odds all his life. He survived numerous bouts of throat cancer as a child. He lived through a near-fatal car crash in '96. An ex-girlfriend and the mother of one of his children killed herself while she was on the phone with him. Still, Pillman seemed destined to survive everything except the heart attack that killed him at the age of 35. His death brought the lifestyle of wrestlers into the forefront. The mix of drugs, alcohol, and other means that were required to survive the lifestyle of a WWF wrestler back then were brought to light. And it was an unflattering spotlight that the promotion found themselves in. Throw in the live Raw interview with Pillman's widow, Melanie, on the day after his death, and Vince McMahon found himself in the middle of a criticism-driven firestorm. Almost 20 years later, there's still questions and debate on how the company handled Pillman's death. This is one of those cases of reality meets pro wrestling, and unfortunately, he was off the walls. When he was in WWE with the whole gun on TV and all that stuff. So, what are your thoughts about his whole death and how they handled that one? Should they have brought it on like network television like that?
It's one of those things that it's a tragedy anytime we lose somebody, and unfortunately, whether it be football or wrestling or whatever, you start to see that over the years people try to get more in depth, or now in football they're doing all this stuff with prevention of concussions, and in wrestling they do a lot of drug testing and all that. So unfortunately it takes things like this to happen before those sorts of steps start to get put in place. But with Pillman, I do remember the whole thing. I was pretty devastated whenever he passed, and WWE put out a Memorial magazine. They've since put out a DVD. I've heard that Pillman's then wife was sort of, and still is sort of crazy. Like, she won't give Pillman's own daughter like any of the money or anything. So I try not to read too much into what just one side of the story says. So I'm sure that there were steps on both sides that probably didn't go well, but ultimately I think now we have more steps in play to keep people, wrestlers, referees, all that stuff safe and healthier. And so for that, it's a shame that anybody had to be taken too soon for something like that, but at least there are good things that are coming from it. So.
Sure. And once again, anybody listening to us, let us know what we're talking about on any other scandals. Feel free to reach us at anotherwrestlingpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook at Another Wrestling Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at AWrestlingPod. Tweet us, Facebook us, comment, leave us some stuff to talk back with you, and let us know what your thoughts about some of these scandals.
Promo of the week.
Mr. Pillman, because as we've just found out, indeed your Bret Hart family members are going to be handcuffed to the ring post.
Oh, you're real funny, McMahon.
Well, they are handcuffed to the ring post.
You're a real laugh. Right when the Hart Foundation severs the shackles of oppression and censorship and lets the world know what we really think. You've got the audacity to handcuff my comrades like common thieves. Well, you made one mistake. You didn't put the cuffs on a convicted felon, the one with the rap sheet. So Stone Cold's gonna pay. So Shamrock, you got nothing to worry about. You can stay being the world's most dangerous referee and working on that 3-count, son. Because Stone Cold is going down the toilet tonight.
Thank you for joining us.
All right, we're going to go back again and talk some more scandals. This is the 2007 steroid scandal. Now, I remember this one pretty vividly. It got a lot of people in trouble. And once again, I think probably paved the way for a lot of the stronger drug policies in the WWE and probably professional wrestling today. But in August of 2007, a mail-order pharmacy got raided, and numerous WWE wrestlers showed up on their customer list. Wrestlers such as Kurt Angle, John Morrison, Batista, Randy Orton, Rey Mysterio, Edge, and Booker T were just a few of the names that showed up on the list, and once again brought steroids and wrestling into the public eye. Prosecutors released the names to the media, and at the time, WWE didn't announce any suspensions. We were left to guess who the company had punished based on who was written off television. It was horrible publicity for the WWE at the time, and the suspension of Booker T led to him leaving the company and heading to TNA. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Here's my thing, though, this whole thing with steroids and stuff. I honestly don't care. If these guys want to use steroids, man, use them. It makes you look muscular, it makes you whatever. It's your life. If you're going to do this and kill yourself at the end of, the day, fine. I think like steroid use in wrestling is totally different than steroid use in like baseball. And hear me out to where, okay, if I'm using steroids in baseball, I'm getting more hits, I'm doing this. Okay, that's affecting a real game. You know what I mean? So when I'm using steroids in pro wrestling, I don't think it's affecting your game. It's just more or less making it look better, looking more muscular. to where, it's a totally different world, I think. And granted, I'm not saying, I'm for it or against it. I'm just saying, at the end of the day, it's already predetermined. So it's not like it's affecting the real outcomes of that, except for the real outcome of their life if they die, yada, yada, yada. So that's my whole thing. I mean, it's one of those things to where, hey, it is what it is. If they want to do it, it's their life. I don't know.
I think that a lot of these guys now, you look at a lot of the wrestlers' physiques, and a lot of them, back in the day, it was the land giants, Hulk Hogan, and all those guys had to have Ultimate Warrior, Macho Man, all those people. But, now you've got people that are not as, ripped. You've got, like, Sami Zayn, you've got, Kevin Owens, you've got a lot of these guys that have... they look normal, and I don't, I think that's a good thing. So
yeah, times have changed.
Yeah, it definitely didn't help the WWE, and I remember that time, like, it was almost as many people then had gotten in trouble for steroids as got injured last year. So there was a huge problem with the roster at that point. So I'm glad it all worked out. Some of the people, I remember, I think Mr. Kennedy got a strike for that as well. So he then went to TNA, and now he left TNA because of a failed drug test, from what we hear. So
I guess some people don't change. Well, Jonathan, we're talking a little bit about scandals. I think one last one I want to throw at you for today happens to deal with World Class Championship Wrestling. Now it goes, if there was ever a promotion that seemed to be under a black cloud, it was World Class Championship Wrestling. The wrestlers who were the cornerstones of this company seemed to be cursed to die young in tragic and questionable circumstances. Everyone has heard of the Von Erich tragedies. Fritz Von Erich's sons seem to have been doomed from the start. In 1952, his oldest son, Jack Jr., died from an accidental electrocution. David died during an overseas tour in Japan in 1984. Depending on who tells the story. But it was either an accidental overdose or a ruptured stomach. Mike survived life-threatening bout with toxic shock syndrome in 1985, only to commit suicide 2 years later. And the youngest son, Chris, battled drug addiction and depression over Mike's death before killing himself in 1991. Kerry lost his right foot in an 1986 motorcycle accident, but continued to wrestle thanks to a prosthetic device. He would later get addicted to drugs, forged prescriptions, get arrested, and he killed himself in 1993. But it was more than just the Von Erichs. Gino Hernandez died of an acute cocaine poisoning in 1986. Bruiser Brody was murdered in Puerto Rico in 1988. Gentleman Chris Adams killed himself in 2001, and Terry Gordy died of a heart attack in 2001. There may not be an actual world-class curse, but no other promotion ever suffered the losses that WCCW did. What do you think about that? Do you think there's a curse?
Far be it from me to say anything about hokum or spirits or anything like that. I don't necessarily know that there was a curse, but it was very hard, I think, for most of those Von Erichs to live up to, first of all, their dad, like the legacy of Fritz Von Erich, and then like Kerry was the Texas Tornado and was like had seemingly everything, but you never know behind closed doors what's going on with these guys. And it was the 80s, and there were a lot of drugs, and I'm sure that didn't help anything. And as far as the other people, Gino Hernandez and Bruiser Brody, those and gentleman Chris Adams, they're definitely very strange circumstances. And Terry Gordy died of a heart attack. That's very unfortunate, but I don't really see anything that's suspicious necessarily about that. But I think that WCCW was an awesome promotion. A lot of great memories for me, but it definitely is. It's one of the saddest things, and it was just like every time that it seemed like everything was going well for the Von Erichs, then another person would pass away. So there's a world class documentary. There's one that WWE did, which is good, but then there's another one that I forget what company put it out, but I would highly suggest going and renting it or watching it or getting it online or however, because it kind of tells the story in depth too. So But yeah, it's tragic. That's the best way to describe that.
Well, guys, gals, everybody, we talked a few tragic stories today, of scandalous stories. Giving her a little bit of 2 cents on it. Maybe we'll have to do a recap on that. Not a recap. Maybe we'll have to do another show and talk about some more scandalous stories. But
joining us now on another wrestling podcast, we'd like to welcome Dan the Beast Severn.
All right, joining us today is a man who, quite frankly, has become a champion in pretty much everything he has ever done. You've seen him in the Octagon, you've seen him in the WWE, and now you get to hear him on another wrestling podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Dan the Beast Severn.
How's it going, Jonathan?
I'm doing great. That's what my question for you was. How are you doing today?
Well, it's phenomenal. People ask me all the time, they're like, how's it going? I go, I'm just living the life. But, some people may say facetiously and stuff like that, but I mean it sincerely. I like what I do. I dictate my own life. I live a very crazy life, a busy life, and I've lived out of a planner since probably my junior year in high school because of all the things I had going on. So I've always been a guy that tends to plan, calculate, and have goals and aspirations, and that's kind of what keeps me focused and keeps me driven on a daily basis.
All right, well, that's great to hear, and we've got a lot to talk about, so I want to get right into it. I know, like you just said, you're a very busy man, so over time, you've become it's undeniable, actually, that you've become one of the greatest fighters in the world. Competitors, anything that you want to say, you've really became one of the best in the world. Growing up, was this something that you ever thought was possible?
Well, no, I'll simply say that, I don't know, I think it would be possible. Yeah, I guess, to say that there's a possibility, yes. I've always been kind of an optimistic type of person, and all that I can do is try. I guess just to give you an example, I teach a youth class with kids, ages 5 on up, and I hear all the time, I can't do that, and I go, no, Coach Severn never wants to hear the words, I can't. Simply say, I'll try. And it goes, sometimes you'll succeed, sometimes you won't, but at least try. And that's, I guess that's what I've always done, is tried to put my best effort forward. Sometimes it has succeeded, sometimes it hasn't, but I'd say that percentage-wise, my success has way outweighed the failures.
Absolutely. Now, you just mentioned, young kids that you help train and coach. But what was your childhood like? What, did you have what we call a normal childhood? Did you move around a lot? Like, what was it like growing up?
Well, I don't know how old you are there, Jonathan, but did you ever remember hearing or watching the TV sitcom Walton's Mountain?
Yes.
Okay, so a lot of these cage fighters, they always have these tales of woe of that they were that they were in juvenile homes, in and out of juvenile homes, in trouble with the law, or they were adopted and things of this nature. And to me, it's like, when they always ask me, well, what's your story there, Dan? I go, well, I grew up on Walton's Mountain. I had 7 other brothers and sisters. The shenanigans that we got into was, cow tipping and stuff like that. So, I grew up, I'd say I had the all-American type of a childhood in the sense that I grew up on a farm, a 120-acre farm, and it was a mixture of crops and animals. So, in the springtime, tilling the soil, stuff like this, planting your crops, harvesting your crops, but then at the same token, we had animals. You name the animals, and we raised them at one point in time. Just running down, chickens, pigs, ducks, geese, lambs. For 7 years, I milked Peggy, the milk cow, for example. And you you learn real quick that you did not name these farm animals because sooner or later they would end up on your plate.
Exactly.
So, you know, that's what I say. I had a phenomenal childhood, you know, growing up on, I said, on this much land, but the land was not just all farmland. There was probably about, I'll say 30 or 40 acres of it was wooded, you know, so to have woods and streams and things of that nature, building a tree house and, you know, being in the river, you know, to go after frogs and tadpoles and, you know, fishing fish and actually eating the fish out of the river, you know, at that point in time, you know, till, you know, whatever, 20, 30, 40 years later, you know, now there's all these concerns about mercury contamination, pollution, and all those things of that nature. But that was not a concern at that point in time. I did not have a care in the world. So,
now, obviously, with all that space, you guys, you know, you had a lot of brothers and sisters. You were running around. Did you guys all play sports growing up? Was there a time whenever it became more important to you? You know, I know that you didn't just wrestle. I know that you dabbled. So what all did you do growing up?
well, like anyone else, I'll give you the pecking order. I was the second born. There's 5 males, 3 females, so 8 of us total. The 5 males did all go to college on full athletic scholarships, all for the sport of wrestling. You know, my brothers and I, we all played football. We all wrestled. You know, but then in the spring, some of us, you know, decided to play baseball. While others, we decided to do track. So it was that was, you know, like I said, this kind of the background there. But to have 5 males that went on to college on full athletic scholarships for the sport of wrestling. 4 of us went to Arizona State. 1 went to Michigan State. My 3 sisters went to college on just about full academic scholarships. So I always tell people I'm a jock with a brain, which is kind of a rare commodity nowadays. And the running, I guess, kind of sibling type of feud was the sisters would simply say, "'Tis better to have brains or brawn." But then our rebuttal would be, "Well, you know, we can beat the brains out of you now, can't we?" And so it was, you know, comedy, you know, but just tongue-in-cheek type of stuff right there, to where, you know, just all done in good sibling rivalry. That's all.
Absolutely. Now, do you remember, you know, as you're growing up, you're starting to play sports and you're in school and all this? Did you have any? You worked on a farm. Did you have any early goals as to what you wanted to do when you grew up?
Yes, I did. Realistically, I would say that, you know, being that some of my friends had older brothers, a couple of them, they're my friends' older brothers, you know, they were in the military and stuff like that. You know, I'd say up until probably my 9th grade year, I was thinking, well, if I end up going to college, more than likely, upon high school graduation, I'm going to go to the military, and I'm going to give up whatever 4 years of my life, and then I was going to go to college on the GI Bill. That's what I was starting to formulate, you know, at that time. But then, you know, by my sophomore year in college, I'm starting to turn the heads of some college coaches. I'm like, well, maybe there's a possibility of yet another route to college, and that is getting some type of an athletic scholarship and going that route. And so that's basically what it was. It's kind of like going, but I'm going to this small, classy school. How am I going to get the heads to turn more and to become more in demand? So basically, by my junior year, I don't remember what this particular tournament was, but this tournament had 2 age groups. It had what's called the junior age group, which means 18 years and younger, which I fell into. I went that age group, and I went 3 weight classes, 198, 220, and heavyweight. The rules were different at that point in time, and you could do that. And typically, every gymnasium would always be set up with 3 mats. So literally, I would be on 1 mat wrestling, they would be calling me on deck on mat number 2, and I would be in the hole in mat number 3. And by the time that they called you to report to the mat, you had 5 minutes before you would be disqualified. So literally, I'd be on mat number 1, and as I finish up my opponent there, I'd be wiping down with a towel and taking a sip of water, head to mat number 2, knowing that I had to do all this probably in less than 15 minutes because I've got to be down to mat 3 here eventually as well. So, but not only did I go my junior age group, I also went the open age group, which was anything over 18 years of age. So now I'm going against college students. I'm going against men that are out of college, vying for national team, Pan American teams, Olympic teams. So I always tell people, in one day, I went 2 age groups, a total of 6 weight classes.
Wow.
17 matches later, I walked out of that gymnasium with 6 gold medals. I got the attention. I turned heads. They're like going, "Who is this kid?"
Well, obviously after winning, championship and after championship, like that, is that when in your mind your goals started to change from thinking maybe military to possibly doing this as a career?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, it's that's what. As I said, by my sophomore year, I was just starting to turn some heads.
Mm-hmm.
To where, as a college coaches talking, but it's very little. That's when it instilled to me that there might be a possibility. So that's when I started to push harder to know that if I only did what my coach tells me to do in practice, I'll be just as good as everybody else. But if I want to become better, I have to spend more time outside of practice. If cardiovascular is my issue, running more. If strength is my issue, lifting more. If I'm having some problems with some techniques, if I'm more susceptible to being beat by this technique, something like this, is spending time drilling this technique, how to do it offensively or how to shut it down defensively. So it just started to dedicate more and more of my time. Yeah, I do a lot of speaking engagements now, everything from goal setting and to setting goals, trying and working hard towards those goals, but everything from there to motivating people to talk about younger kids, the bullying type movements and things of that nature, just the importance of education. And it's I use myself as an example. Because I just tell them I was just like any other kid. Kind of just going through, but it just, about my freshman year in high school, I did read my very first Scholastic Wrestling magazine, and that's when I read about, weightlifting techniques of, how to get to different types of weight classes, lower weight classes, losing body fat, cardiovascular routines, weightlifting routines, then the psychological aspects, mental imagery, and then, by my freshman year, I said, my eyes were open to, wow, there's a whole lot more to this sport than what I thought there was. But then as I go into practice, just doing what the coach told you to do, but I kept thinking, well, if I just do what the coach is telling me to do, I'm going to be just as good as these other 40 or 50 guys that are on the wrestling team.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to make me better? For example, in the same principle goes in a state like the state of Michigan, there are over 400 high schools that have high school wrestling programs. If you are only doing what that coach tells you to do, you really should be no better, no worse than anybody else. So there's a potential of 400 state champions.
Mm-hmm.
What is going to make that difference? And that is putting that time in to work on all those factors I said before. Conditions of problem, doing more cardiovascular type of work. If technique or lack of technique, spending more time in those areas. And the key word that comes up almost all the time is, if you want to succeed in anything, what are you willing to sacrifice? Because everything has a cost to it.
Yep.
Even now, as I have a 10,000 square foot training facility here in Coldwater, Michigan. The name of the place is called Michigan Sports Camp. It's a very generic name because I simply know I can teach whatever I want underneath this roof as long as I have an instructor that is capable of doing it. And I always tell people it's referred to as the House of Champs because I've had a lot of guys have a lot of success that have come out of there. But it boils down to, what are you willing to sacrifice? And when they're like, well, what do you mean? I go, well, most of you are not willing to sacrifice time away from your friends or your family. And that's, or from a TV show, or from a video game, or from whatever. And that's, if you want to know how you're going to get better, you have to take time that you are spending in other areas and now direct that towards your goals. If that is, technique-wise or something like that. Because I'm a driven person, John. I've been a driven person. Like I said, probably by my 9th grade year on, just by reading that first Scholastic Wrestling magazine, and I talk about that as part of my education because I simply say that, an education, it is a power. It's the more that you read, the more. Let me rephrase that. It's not. It matters what you read as well. If you just read a bunch of frivolous type of comic books, I really don't think that's going to help advance you in other areas. It's what you read, and you fill your time with it. And even now, even my significant other, she kind of wishes that I would read something just for entertainment purposes. She says everything you read, she says you're so mechanical. You're like a robot in the sense that there really is no entertainment value because it's always like these self-help or motivational or success type of material. And I go, but I enjoy that. Kind of like when we first started the interview, and you asked me how I'm doing it, and I say I'm living the life. You can realize, ever since 1992, I've worked for myself. I always tell people I'm the president and the janitor all wrapped in one. I get to tell myself what to do. I get to fire myself if I don't like it. How my work, but I have to rehire myself because I can't find anybody else that's to work for that cheap bastard either. So I mean, it sounds comical, but it's and most people enjoy being around me because they see the upbeat personality that I have. Because when you meet most people, Jonathan, and you say, how's it going? How many people really come back with a very positive response?
It's true. It's true.
I do that all the time with people. I'm like, hey, good morning, how's it going? Stuff like this. And they're all like, it's almost like you open a Pandora's box. It's like, oh, woe is me, woe is me. And they're like, well, how are you doing? I go, fantastical. Or something like that. And they're like, I go, but don't ask me how to spell that. It makes them smile, makes them giggle, stuff like this. So I like to think that I brighten up people's lives just by smiling at them and just say, fantastic. Do you really want to delve deeply into it and hear someone's tale of woes and darkness and stuff like this? Nobody does.
Well, it's great to see that you're so positive. I think that there needs to be more of that in the world right now. Obviously, now more than ever. But it's good to see because everybody's got problems. Everybody's got issues. So it's just it's how you deal with them, I guess, is the best thing. And you've
I'll give you, one of my biggest problems there, Jonathan, is time.
Mm-hmm.
The sheer lack of it. As I'm sitting at my desk, I'm looking at all the different things to do here. As I'm going, I have to live 3 more lives just to get the current list done, and I keep adding to it on a daily basis. So
yeah.
I'll never be really bored with life because I like what I do, and I have such a big variety of what I do. I always tell people, it's like, half the time, I don't know if I want to be a professional wrestler when I grow up. I want to be a cage fighter when I grow up. And, doing amateur wrestling and submission grappling. These are just things that I have done. And it's kind of going, but I enjoy the aspect of travel. I've been to every state in the United States. I have done something in every state in the U.S. I've been to every country that has ever had a wrestling program, and some countries that do not exist anymore, such as there used to be in East Germany. I've been there 3 different times to see the Iron Curtain and the Berlin Wall, and to do competition. I did an interview with a German group, I'll say, somewhere last, say 6 or 8 months. I asked them to interview me, stuff like this. They're like, have you ever been to Germany, Mr. Severn? And I go, well, I've been to both West Germany and I've been to East Germany, but I have never been to just Germany. And they're like, what? I said, I've been there 3 different times, but that was still during the Cold War era. So I flew into West Germany, and then by ground transportation, this U.S. team and myself, we had to pass through the Iron Curtain to get into East Germany. Leipzig, East Germany is where this tournament was held, and they were just blown away because they were just much younger people. You know, for example, Johnson, don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I am 32.
32. So a lot of things that always come up, always tell people, I started my amateur wrestling career in 1969. I started teaching amateur wrestling by 1971. I won my first national title in 1972. And I'd always tell them, like, going, and as people start doing this calculation, like, man, you're old. I go, yeah, I am. But one of the greatest testimonials to an athlete is the test of time. Not the sheer fact that I won a 1Z or a 2Z type of event. The sheer fact that I won stuff again and again and again, and it transferred over to the next sport. And I won things again and again and again, and it transferred over to something else. So if you can see, there is somewhat of a pattern that I take the same mental approach and physical approach to almost everything I do. And I always tell people, because they still see me working out, they're like, well, what are you working out or training for now? And I'll say, for the greatest competition in the world. And they're like, what's that? And I go, it's called life. I go, everyone wants to live as long as possible. Everyone would like to have quality of life over the long haul. But if you have to look at it like an investment. If I don't put something into it, how can I ever expect to take something out of it? And that's the thing that I equate to all the time, because there's so many. Well, in the United States, it's just one of those countries where we are kind of known as the fattest country in the world. So we have a very high ratio of diabetes, heart disease, things of that nature.
Well, I want to get back just for a second. You had talked about high school and college, and these days it's not really uncommon for people, scouts to come in. You said that people are scouting you for college. My question is, and we'll get into your pro wrestling career in just a second, but did you ever have anybody during those times approach you about professional wrestling?
Through the mid-80s and yes.
Okay.
I was approached by a number of different independent professional wrestling companies.
Okay.
But had I turned pro at that point in time, I would have lost my amateur status, and my amateur wrestling career meant too much to me, so I did not turn pro at that time.
Okay.
But as of the 1992 Olympics, a new rule came down from the United States Olympic Committee that allowed athletes to be both amateur and professional and simultaneously, as long as you are not involved in a high school athletic program or a collegiate program, because you would still be covered by high school athletic association rules or the NCAA rules. I was well past my collegiate eligibility, so I could have my cake and eat it too.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, we know when you started your career in UFC, but prior to your career in UFC, that's when you truly began your MMA career. We've heard some stories of you fighting in wrestling and all over the world, like you just mentioned. at that point, before you began your UFC career, you were traveling in some places that may not be all that safe for you. Was there ever a fear for you that you may not make it back home?
Only on a couple occasions when I say that. Primarily, I've regaled the story quite a few different times. I talk about my very first true international experience. I mean, I did some previously when I went over to the country of Turkey. On that particular trip, it was normal up to the point that we had a moderate-sized crowd, stuff like this, lots of things along those nature. But something happened that none of my teammates and I ever knew about. I'm sure our coaches knew, but they were probably keeping us in the dark so that we weren't panicking at. Something happened between the United States and Turkish officials, to where our crowds quadrupled in size, to where military surrounded our hotel towards the evening. We were told to keep our curtains closed and not to walk by open windows.
Wow.
Upon arriving into at that place where we flew into Istanbul, Turkey. Upon arriving that day, on that particular day, we had just departed the airport by roughly about 45 minutes, and it was just a couple terrorists had entered the airport and had thrown hand grenades into crowds of people, and then machine gunned down a number of other people before they were subdued. Now, unlike in the United States, we really don't show very graphic pictures of really the demise of people. Most other countries, they don't care about that. That they rather show the graphicness of the nature so that people, you should be a little bit more horrified by what took place. Well, I think the military police chief or whatever was holding up the heads of the two terrorists that they had subdued. Of course, they were not alive.
Yes.
So, like I said, it just, to say from there, then, our crowd, something happened between U.S. and Turkish officials, and our crowds quadrupled, military surrounding our hotel at night. Lights had to be off, not walking in front of windows. And then, now the actual dual meets, because this was all amateur wrestling, but it was amateur wrestling, freestyle wrestling, which are the two amateur wrestling inside the United States. We're the only country that does folk style. The rest of the world does freestyle Greco-Roman. So this particular trip was a freestyle tour, and I'm just a part of just a U.S. all-star teams, ages 16, 18 years of age, and we're out there wrestling. And we're even having, because we're doing so well against our opponents, that groups of men are, you got to realize, there's U.S. military is still present inside this arena, and like MPs, and groups of Turkish men, 2 or 3 at a time, would start to rush the match because we were winning, and literally these military personnel, they're pulling out their nightstick and subduing these people.
Wow.
To the point that as we're sitting on the bench, knowing that your match is coming up, you're wondering as you're sitting there, does someone have a set of crosshairs on you right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so those thoughts did cross my mind way back then. It's been a while since I've never talked about that, because it's until you asked this question. But you really thought there was a possibility that someone could have, there could be a sniper, terrorist, whatever, could have sights on you right then and there, and you'd never have known it.
Yeah, I don't know how well I would do under that pressure. I think that's just amazing. But now, obviously, you're.
But as you said before, though, a lot of that really did help prepare me for my cage fighting career. I always tell people I've been hurt far worse in my amateur wrestling career than I have been in all of my cage fights combined. But which is even more ironic is I have been hurt in my professional wrestling career more than the other two combined.
Yeah, I could see that too.
So that's, I mean, that's almost mind-boggling because one is just fantasy. It's a show. It's entertainment. I don't like it when people say it's fake because it may not be a true athletic competition, but it's a very physical show of give and take. And the athletes, I always say that professional wrestlers are some of the most incredible athletes, doing some of the most incredible athletic maneuvers without the aid of a safety net.
Oh, absolutely. And you started, wrestling with the illustrious NWA back in '95. At that time, were there any people in the locker room that were kind of upset, even though you had a very amazing amateur background? Were there people kind of upset that you were coming from like a different world other than professional wrestling? Did you get any of that in the locker room?
No, I'd say not really. The professionals actually made me a whole lot more nervous than actually climbing in and doing, legitimate competition. In legitimate competition, all I do is walk up there and get results.
Yes.
But in professional wrestling, you are filling a window of time of entertainment. It could be a short match known as a squash match, or it could be a long drawn out 1 hour match known as Ironman match.
Ironman match.
That they call it. But when you go for 1 hour for an hour match, basically they refer to it as an Ironman match. Not that doesn't happen very often anymore, just because Americans have such short span of attention, short span of attention. But that the bar continues to be risen more and more, especially in that crazy world of professional wrestling. But I'd say I didn't really wasn't concerned as much there as I was concerned for what the people in amateur wrestling thought of me going into professional wrestling.
Yes.
I did not tell any of my friends because I simply knew that I would have been probably ostracized. And I traveled basically about 2.5 hours away to Lima, Ohio, and I was working with Al Snow and Body Slam machine that he had in Lima, Ohio at that time. So talk about an investment in time alone. Here I am driving 2.5 hours for a 3-hour workout and then driving back 2.5 hours. So I've got 8 hours invested into one workout. And I'm doing that a couple times a week.
Wow. You became a champion fairly quickly in the world of professional wrestling. With the NWA, that was I really did not have very much of a professional background on me. That I was approached by Dennis Carluzzo and a couple other people in the NWA, and they wanted to do kind of throwback of days gone by. They wanted to put the belt back on a shooter. Basically, the term just means a person of true capabilities. Yeah.
And so I didn't wear any kind of flamboyant outfits. Literally, it was the same type of gear that I wore in the Ultimate Fighting Championships. I was wearing for the NWA and matches at that time.
So, were you surprised? I mean, just by the amount of confidence that they put into you in wanting to make you their champion?
Well, it made me feel good that they felt I had that kind of capability. And as more time passed on, I became more and more aware of all the different past champions who had held that belt, and it's very, very prestigious. The more studying and looking into the background, There is a great history, a lineage that the NWA National Wrestling Alliance had. Not all of the previous champions have had legitimate background, but I think during those eras, I think it had a lot more respect to it. I always try to tell people that, internationally speaking, the NWA belt probably is probably much more prestigious than what the WWE belt is, just because of a lot of the legendary shooters that have held that belt.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of cool. Like one out of blue one night, that Bruno Sammartino called me up on my personal cell phone. I mean, I had not even met him at that point in time. Let alone how did he ever get my personal cell phone? So he calls me up and then he just goes, "I hear what you're doing with the belt stuff like this. You're giving it the honor and respect it deserves. Keep up the good work there, young man." And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool.
Oh, I'd say. Now, you mentioned a lot of travel and all of that. Was that one of the things that, you said you enjoyed traveling, but was that one of the actual hardships as well of being a professional wrestler during those times? Because I know that you guys traveled around a whole lot. So it was obviously something that you enjoyed, but was it also one of the hardships of professional wrestling?
No, I agree. You hit the nail on the head. It's a give and take world. And that was, as I said, I lived out of a planner. And at the time that I was working, even when I was working for the WWF at the time, I was the very first non-exclusive wrestler ever. And as far as I know, still am. I was working for 35 different promoters in the NWA alone. On top of now giving the WWF X number of dates on an annual basis. But I was not exclusive to Vince. I was not exclusive to the NWA. So literally, now I could take bookings with ECW, WCW, or any other independent promotion if I wanted to.
That is...
So I lived out of a planner. I would be on the road easily 20-some odd days a month, to where the point when I'd be waking up, in my car, because I travel by my car, I would have multiple gym bags in my trunk. Am I a cage fighter? Am I a professional wrestler tonight? Am I going to be teaching an amateur wrestling class here? Am I going to be working with law enforcement there? I mean, I would have to look. I'd wake up in the morning sometimes, and then I'd do, as I'm, rubbing the sleep on my eyes, stuff like this, I'm thinking, well, first of all, I'm thinking, I'm like, where am I at? What is my function today? I actually had to look at, I always refer to my planner as my portable brain. And even when people talk to me, I go, "Dad, remember we got this coming?" I go, "Send me an email." I said, unless it's printed in my planner, it doesn't exist. A lot of people, they just didn't understand. I wasn't just a professional wrestler. I wasn't just a cage fighter. I literally, my first love is still teaching amateur wrestling. But since that time, since that 94 period of time, I've been working with law enforcement. Since 1995, I've been working with corrections. And since that time, I have worked with Border Patrol, Air Marshals, and military. I'm the first civilian ever to go on a couple of the private security companies that retrains a lot of the military once their tours are done, and they go right back to Iraq or Afghanistan and do the exact same job. They're just paid 3 or 4 times as much now that they're in the private sector. So I think each one has a different set of rules of engagement as well. And I understand them. I guess that's really kind of Benjamin. That's kind of like one of my true gifts is physical mechanics. I've even worked with my different children on simple aspects of athletics, of doing the run the long jump or high jump, or even my oldest son when he was a basketball player. I was not a basketball player, but I understood the principles and fundamentals. Having orange cones and having a portable basketball and they had run them to drills so they could bounce basketball with his left hand, bounce basketball with his right hand, weaving back and forth in between cones, doing layups, doing shots, playing around the world, all this stuff to where it helped them. It's kind of like that, as I say, as I go back to like that youth class that I teach there. I do a youth MMA class, but youth MMA does not stand for mixed martial arts. It stands for modern martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a class that goes from age 5 up to just around that junior high age, knowing that once they hit junior high, now they have team sports that they can jump into: basketball, football, wrestling, all that kind of stuff. And I'm just there to help teach them gross motor skills, hand-eye coordination, things of that nature, because they do all types of gymnastics, tumbling. They'll do all types of drills that develop hand-eye coordination, dexterity, movement. A lot of the coaches, they love what I do here because they know that I'm giving them, I'm playing games with them, physical games, but I'm developing all those skills so that it will pertain to football, it will pertain to basketball, it will pertain to all these other sports.
Absolutely. But I think, we've talked, kind of about your training and all that stuff, but one of the coolest things that I think, because we share this, is the fact that you've maintained a chemical-free lifestyle. I think that's in this day and age, especially for the line of work that you've been in, that is just an unheard of feat. Why is it so important to you that you've maintained that chemical-free lifestyle?
I'll say for a couple of reasons. I should know that I can look in the mirror and I can know that I've achieved all my success on my own ability. I didn't have to take a pill. I didn't have to take a shot. But on the other aspect is I do a lot of speaking engagements. And when I'm there in front of those kids, or whether it be kids or high school or college or even talking with men, I always despise that hypocritical athlete that they're like, they're going, yo, don't do drugs, stay in school, and yet a week later they're busted with this, that, and the whole 9 yards. I'm thinking, why did you ever do that talk in the first place? Just shut up.
Yep.
Or just at least admit, do as I say and not as I did. But there's just so many hypocritical athletes that I don't like that. I'd have so much more respect to say, I screwed up. The temptation was too much there for me. And I've had temptation around me at all times. To be in high school, when I was in high school, marijuana was the number one thing. LSD was probably number two right there with it. I went to a lot of parties on a Friday night or something like this to only stay for a little bit, and everything started to get popped up. And the guys like, "Hey Dan, let's have a beer." I got less of beer. Something like that. Just coming up to tomorrow. The hard part is that, okay, at that age, you're 17 years of age, getting ready to turn 18 years of age, right by your senior year in high school, and you got a good-looking gal. They're like, "Hey Dan, let's go smoke a joint, and let's go, have sex or something like this." And it's like going, "Wow, there's a lot of temptation there." They start going, but no, it will affect me in this way. It'll affect me in that way. Whether you're telling them or you know that in your mind, that you find a way to kind of bow out or get out of there. That's the peer pressure is huge, especially at the young age. Again, that's what I talk about when I talk with young people. The peer pressure, because everyone wants to be accepted somehow. I always said that I had several different families and when it came to sports, because in the fall, it was my football family. In the winter, it was my wrestling family. In the springtime, it was my track family. But growing up on the farm, there was always my family. There was always, when you wake up in the morning, you got to get your chores done. You got to take care of your animals before you get taken care of. You got to, that's just the rules of growing up. Sharon. I knew what Sharon was because having 7 other brothers and sisters, I was second on the totem pole, so it's like, did I ever have a bedroom to myself? No. I had to share a bedroom. with an older brother, stuff like this. You know, there was there was the we called it. We had two different what do you call them? They're laundry baskets.
Mm-hmm.
That was if the kids, you had a white sock laundry basket and a dark sock laundry basket. You just hope that you got two socks that were closely matched to each other. Now, what a lot of kids think today is pretty cool because they wear all these odd matching socks. Well, I must have been pretty darn cool way before my time because it was tough to find a matching pair of socks sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Now,
I mean, but there's just so many. Even my own kids, they don't have a comprehension of this, because it's I have 5 children of my own. And, they don't have any comprehension about this. It's, but about those kinds of things, it's, I try to instill a work ethic, into them as well.
Well, it's...
But, they just have this generation of millennials, I swear to God, I just don't understand. It's, they just still feel like they're just entitled to anything. I'm thinking, I know how I raised my kids, and yet I can see how they're being influenced by their friends and stuff like this because, like the first time when my oldest son was approaching me, he goes, Daddy, he goes, why don't I receive an allowance? I go, because you're really not doing anything extra around here to earn an allowance first. And they're like, well, but my buddies, they receive this on a weekly basis. I go, for doing what? And they're like, well, because they clean up their room. I go, well, you live in this house. You should clean up your room. And I said, you don't buy no food. You don't pay for the heating bills, cooling bills, anything of that nature. I said, so, I mean, to me, it's, these are just some bare bones essentials here of living here underneath this roof. I go, but picking up your room or do something that is normal, there's no compensation for that. I go, if you would like some jobs to make money, I said, I've got no problem doing that. All my kids have been my janitors in my training facility, to give you an example. So, mopping mats, sweeping floors, cleaning toilets, all that kind of stuff. Or I'll have jobs, to trimming the hedges, mowing the lawn, raking leaves. I could come up with chore after chore after chore, and they receive compensation that way. But it's knowing that you work to receive something. Again, that's what I say. There's so many things wrong in the United States here and we continue to lower our standards, and the handouts continue. And I'm thinking somebody's got to work. So,
well, it shows through you, like we said, and it's no secret that these are things that have helped you throughout your career. You're still fighting even today. You mentioned that you have this training facility, but what's kind of your secret to staying in shape after all this time of doing this? And how come your body hasn't broken down versus other people that have done this for less amount of time than you?
Well, you've asked me 2 kind of loaded questions. I mean, it's I'll break it down here like this. How have I been able to maintain and not break down? I'd say it's a combination of a couple things. I always knew what my strength was going into matches in the first place. If we talk about like mixed martial arts, I knew that my grappling ability was my strength. My weakness was my stand-up. No matter how much time I spend on my stand-up game, it will never equal my ground game because I started my ground game in 1969. If I only started my stand-up game in 1994, how will that mathematical equation ever equal? It won't, because I still continue to do ground stuff, and I have incorporated a lot more stuff in my stand-up game, but they will never equal. The scales will always be lopsided. Now, I never thought I would have done the cage fighting stuff as long as I have. And the reason I refer to this cage fighting, because most of your listeners, they only know about the word MMA for mixed martial arts, but they don't really remember the predecessor was known as NHB, No Holds Barred. The big difference there is today's athlete operates under the rules of about 37 rules. Part of those rules, there's weight classes, there's time periods known as rounds. Athletes wear gloves, and they fight one opponent in a given evening. Back in the no-holds-barred era, you had only 2 rules that you had to abide by. Those being the do not bite your opponent, and number 2, do not stick fingers in the eye socket, no eye gouging. Into the rules. Anything else that your imagination could conjure up, you were good to go. It was bare-knuckled. There were no weight classes. There were no time periods, and it was an 8-man tournament. You had to face and defeat 3 opponents in the same 2-hour pay-per-view that still prevails to this day. And yours truly here is the only Triple Crown champion from the no-holds-barred era. I won one of the regular 8-man tournaments. I won I think the one and only Ultimate that they ever had, where they brought back various champions and runners-up into what it was going to be like the Super Bowl of events. And then ended up winning one of the Super Bowls. So, I don't even know what the question was, but that's basically, I just got to give the differences between what mixed martial arts and what no holds barred is. So, what was the actual question now here, Benjamin?
I was just wondering how you've been able to...
How I held up. Because of my background, I knew my grapplability was my background, and then I always used that as my strength. I tried to really minimize ever getting hit. I'd always try to stay outside of range and close the distance, not giving my opponent the opportunity. Has it worked all the time? No, not all the time, but it worked out most of the time. Because I have, when you look at the win-loss ratio overall, I do believe I have the highest winning percentile of anyone in the world. There's only 4 people in the world that have over 100 cage fights. I'm one of the 4. There's only 3 that have over 100 victories. I'm one of the 3. But the ironic part is, I faced the other 3. I defeated the other 3, and the closest one to my age was 15 years my junior. When you start throwing those categories, the fact that I was almost 37 years of age when I started my cage fighting career back in 1994. Who starts at that age? You retire.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, I only ever planned on doing one event. It went okay. Did get hurt? Well, let's do another event. Then the first year, the 5th year, the 10th year, I think it was 19 years later, is when I think I better think about exiting this sport because I'm giving up, on average, 2 decades of age to younger opponents. And I can already tell my body was slowing down. My mind is saying move, but by the time the wires go from my mind to my body is going, okay. That's not a good combination. Because when you lose in mixed martial arts, you are taking physical punishment. And what I'll say here is now is that I did retire in 2013. I did come back out of retirement just relatively recently because I had a group that approached me in November 2015. Would you consider coming back out of retirement for Ken Shamrock? I go, I'm all ears to go on. So I started my training camp back in November 2015 for a match that was supposed to take place. The original date was February 20th or 21st, whatever that Sunday was. That is where that show was going to have, and then all of a sudden he makes this announcement about him and Hoist Gracie doing this Bellator fight on that Friday was like the 19th. And I'm thinking, how is he going to fight Hoist Gracie on the 19th on a Friday and then face me on a Sunday?
Yep.
So I've put a lot of heat on Ken because there's just so many things that was misleading, that he misled a company. Whether he misled, he lied, I'm not sure which aspect, because I was not privy to his conversations with the company. I just know that he was he had signed a letter of intent. He had taken a financial deposit and stuff like this, and then to announce another fight, you can't. Just as far as I know, with any kind of athletic commission or working for a company, one of those prerequisites that they would have in that contract or conditions of the contract is for you not to take a match 30 or 60 days before our event, and this is taking place. Friday is Bellator. Sunday is this UR Network. It's supposed to be taking place. Wow. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So there's only really one person that probably knows the truth. Actually, two people. That would be the UR Network people and Ken Shamrock.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been around that industry just long enough to know that I could do some pretty good estimation work on all of this.
You've been in the business for a long time. You've seen people come. You've seen people go. What are your thoughts on some of these crossover athletes, such as obviously Brock Lesnar and the soon to debut CM Punk? Do you have any thoughts on either of these guys?
Well, I mean, I'll say yes and no. What I'll do is I'll address like CM Punk first. I've had the last people just ask me what do I think about his chances of success in this nature, and I simply would tell him, I really don't know. I don't know CM Punk. I don't have a clue as to what his legitimate background is. I would hope that if he's making this kind of noise or drawing attention to the fact that he's going to be moving into mixed martial arts, that he actually has some type of tangible skills. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, he will become an embarrassment to himself. Mm-hmm. But at the same token, I keep with that. Well, look at the industry that he's from. He's from the professional wrestling industry. Well, they tend in that industry, awful bold claims take place all the time. So I'll just wait to see what happens when he finally does.
Okay.
Make that transition. If he makes that transition, it was like, am I really waiting for it? No. Does he affect my life whatsoever? No. Same way like a Brock Lesnar. It's Brock comes from a legitimate amateurist background. Went to Minnesota University. Was a very successful college wrestler, and so he actually had tangible abilities.
Absolutely.
And one of the greatest I guess quotes that I liked is when asked directly, do you use steroids? Or have used steroids? His reply was, I have never tested positive. Now, you gotta remember, what was the question?
Exactly.
What was the answer?
Exactly.
So to me, it's like, he's had a lot of success. Something tells me he probably had some good genes. Probably, I don't know if he's got any brothers or sisters. I really don't know what his background is. I just know that he wrestled at Minnesota. He held a lot of the strength records for in the weight room and things of that nature. If I was to be a guessing type of person, I kind of really doubt if he's lifetime chemical free.
Yeah. Well,
I think then that's called money in the bank at that point in time.
All right, we want to thank Dan the Beast Severn for coming on. And if you want to find out anything else about Dan Severn, head on over to dansevern.com.
All right, Jonathan, what a show. For people that are going to possibly tune in next week, why would they want to tune in next week, Jonathan? Who's going to be on the show?
Wow, this one is a long time coming. One of my favorites. I can't wait to talk to this gentleman. He was 1/5 of the infamous Spirit Squad. Ladies and gentlemen, none other than Kenny!
And Jonathan, we pick topics on each show. Today we talk scandals. Next week we're also going to talk about who's next. And I'm not talking about Goldberg. Who's next in the NXT world, or the professional wrestling world, who's going to be that next indie talent that they bring into the WWE universe, Jonathan? So if you want to give us a call, if you have any ideas of who they should possibly bring in next, give us a call, 802-297-7672. Easy to remember, it's 802-AWP-7672, and leave us a message on who you want to see next in the ring.
Now, if you're in the Hudson Valley and you love comic books, action figures, and anything dealing with pop culture, head on over to collectorsrealm.net. You guys can visit them at the Duchess Marketplace on Saturdays and Sundays between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. That's Duchess Marketplace, located at 453 Route 9 in Fishkill, New York, just south of I-84. Head on over to collectorsrealm.net.
Hey, all you professional wrestling fans out there, we here at Another Wrestling Podcast have just the thing for you. If you've always wanted to join one of those monthly subscription sites that give you all kinds of treats and goodies in the mail, the best one by far is ProWrestlingCrate.com. You can follow them at PWCrate on Twitter or at ProWrestlingCrate on Instagram. Be sure to check them out and subscribe. The cost is nominal, and you get some amazing things every month. And you never know what you're going to get. So tell them that Another Wrestling Podcast sent you, and enjoy the Pro Wrestling Crate.
Head on over to pwpnation.com. It's a wrestling media website and community that loves professional wrestling. They strive on creating an array of interesting articles and reviews on everything professional wrestling. Head on over to pwpnation.com.
Well, that's the show. We want to thank you all for listening today.
Every week we do this show free of charge for you, the fans.
And if you're wondering how to repay us, we have just the thing.
Subscribe to us on iTunes.
Hey, and while you're there, be sure to rate us and give us a good review.
If you're looking for more information about AWP, then head on over to anotherwrestlingpodcast.com.
We are all over social media, and you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and more.
If you are an AWP superfan, you can also show your support by going over to ProWrestlingTees.com/AnotherWrestlingPodcast and buying one of our official AWP shirts.
We couldn't do this show without you, so tune in next week for
Another Wrestling Podcast.